So with that, let's move on to the next panel, which is really around Rollup and Appchain Stacks. We've seen a lot of activity with Rollup and Appchain Stacks in 2024. Lots of innovation, and we believe that in 2025 it's really going to the next level. So I'd like to invite the following, Cooper Midroni, Senior Product Manager at Offchain Labs. Hey, hi Cooper. David Hawig, who is the Director of Ecosystem Development at Polkadot. Yeah, David, you're here? Oh yeah, great. Nicky, Chalabi, who is Head of DeFi, Taiko. And my dear friend Matt. Matt, are you there? Oh great, Matt Schmenk from Avalanche, and this is going to be moderated by Ghan, who's the co-founder and CTO at Zeeve. Yeah. Over to you, folks. So I'd say this is one of the hottest panels in Denver, regardless of how much snow it was there last week and how much it's going to be the next. And I'm thankful that my panelists are not wearing boxing gloves, but that's a good thing as well. We'll have all the vocal cords on. We have a powerhouse for a discussion to talk about what is going to happen in the Web3 growth. And most of the growth we all know is happening through scaling solutions like layer 2 chains, layer 3 chains, be it rollups or different app chains. We have Arbitrum, Taiko, Polkadot, Avalanche here. What else do you need? I think I'll start with the question, and I think I'll throw it to pretty much all of you. And the question is, what are we looking at in 2025 and beyond? People say there was a time when they say OP rollups, that is the thing to do. Then they say ZK is the end game, but then we have base rollups as well. And now we have Avalanche L1s, a different way of permissionless approach towards app chains. So Cooper, I think we'll start with you in terms of, what is your take? What is going to happen?
I think right now we're in an era where there's an explosion of stack options. And I think that it's great that we have all this product diversity because builders should have as many available options to find the exact right combination of decentralization, security, block speed, all these parameters that they want to use to tailor the experience of the applications. So I would expect that this diversity increases. I would expect that we see only more stacks enter the game. I think that there are network effects present when things like shared liquidity or in Ethereum we see a lot of this aligning around interoperability solutions between common stacks. So I think there'll also be kind of a unification of the experience, which is mainly coming from interoperability, hiding some of the differences. We hear like chain abstraction as a term that is thrown around a lot. Basically the idea that we hide the experience of being on a chain. You don't need to really remember where your assets were left. You can kind of control them and have this really unified and clean app experience. So I'd expect both the stacks to increase underneath, but I'd also expect that users actually get to be hidden from a lot of that complexity, and it really just becomes more options for builders and developers.
Super. David, I think I'll pass on this question next to you because we've heard Polkadot doing a lot of new things. It is not the old Polkadot we heard about 2 years ago. There's Jam, which is picking up. So how do you think Jam is going to fit into this new era of app chains and scaling?
Yeah, basically, I think there are, what you also mentioned is there are so many different use cases where you need different solutions, and the great benefit is you can adapt, you can use whatever you need at the moment. So if you're just a startup, a Solidity smart contract might be all that you need. If you actually have users and you need a huge throughput, then a rollup or parachain, as we call it in our ecosystem, might be a better fit. Yeah.
It's funny. I think it was 2 years ago, well, a year and a half ago, I was at DevConnect, and I was the only L1 on a panel of all L2s. And I think we've gone kind of full circle where we're seeing the downfall of general purpose L1s and L2s. We have way too many of those. I think it's an oversaturated market. And we're really seeing the rise of like application-specific rollups or L1s or parachains, for instance. And that's actually why I got in the space, not why I got in the space, but before I joined Avalanche Labs 4 or 5 years ago, I fully subscribed to the thesis of application-specific blockchains, and so it led me down the path of Cosmos, Polkadot, or Avalanche. And I think it's nice to see like things like Unichain or Hyperliquid or DYDX kind of get product market fit on the permissionless monolithic environments, and then migrate over to their own application-specific environment. And so I think we're going to continue to see that in the future. We'll probably only have 5 or 10 general-purpose L1s and L2s in the next 2 years, in my opinion. But we're going to see an abundance of application-specific rollups and layer 1 blockchains.
Well, these are super insights. So Nicky, I'll come to you now because we talked about different type of solutions, and you're building a based rollup solution. So how do you see the fitment for projects? When do you think these projects will choose a based rollup, and what kind of project these can be?
I mean, from my perspective, the future is based, and there's no discussion around that. So, and why I would like actually. I mean, generally speaking, right, it really depends on your use case, as many people mentioned here. Like, you can go for a ZK rollup, you can go for an optimistic rollup. If you want to go, you can go for Validium, for Volition. It's up to you to decide. And maybe different use cases in the end of the day, like, might require different solutions. So, like, it's not like one size fits all. But when we're talking about, like, based rollups, what we really need to mention, like basically we're inheriting everything pretty much from Ethereum. So when it comes to settlement, consensus, layers, and data availability layer as well. And what's really important is that like the base sequencing inherits the centralization of the layer 1. So that's our sequencer is decentralized. And hence, we do see that the narrative is shifting towards based rollups, and essentially, like the decentralized sequencer is becoming a topic. And I do hope that one day, like end users will do request or will do demand like censorship-resistant L2s, and centralized sequencers will become obsolete.
So somehow, hearing this, we're seeing that, there was a discussion a long time ago that was about scalability and decentralization, and, with new L1s, L2s coming around, we are getting to the same discussion again that, how do we achieve more decentralization? Because, when we started solving the scaling problem, decentralization started getting compromised again. So what is your take would be on, decentralization through decentralized sequencing, but I'll pass this question on to David as well, and in Cooper, you too. Like, what is your solution to decentralization? Because of course, in the end, the projects would want decentralization. They would want trust, security, which would not come out of decentralized ordering, sequencing, or other type of solutions.
So basically, with Polkadot, we learned the hard lessons that the end users don't care so much. Basically, we really focused on decentralization, security, and so on, and users don't necessarily care about it. But what we realize now, with also the shift in the regulatory environment, that companies care. So basically, maybe the end users, the consumers actually, they for them it doesn't matter, but whatever product they are using on-chain, that needs to be secure. As a company, you don't want to have something that can easily be exploited, that is centralized. You don't want to depend in the end in one single entity that runs something and so on. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, Cooper?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think, from seeing just how people use the product and how people, interact with, having their own rollup stack, definitely the most popular configuration is people building an L3 with, our DA layer, basically trading off from lowest possible cost, fastest possible speed, best user experience. And I think they're trying to win by capturing users and, basically building successful app ecosystems. And so that really sometimes has not a lot to do with the centralization, but the groups that do care are, institutions. I could definitely see something like base sequencing mattering a lot to a traditional finance institution that's sometimes even too scared to move their funds from L1 to L2. And I also think that, for us, we recently launched Bold, which is our permissionless fraud-proof protocol. So it's kind of a step change from an institution being able to, monitor the chain and, run a validator knowing if something is wrong, to now actually being able to submit the fraud proof themselves, which gives them just that much more security. So obviously validation is just kind of one axis of decentralization, sequencing is another, but definitely we think that the users that we currently have are pretty much choosing to just optimize for user experience and minimize cost.
So I guess optimized user experience is the priority, is the important factor, and then comes the decentralization, maybe as an obvious evolution of the solutions themselves. Now, Matt, what is your take on, because Avalanche has been, I would say, it's permissionless from day one. L1s are permissionless. So what can you add?
So although I would love for them to be permissionless since day one, we actually just pushed the POS upgrade probably 6 months ago. Before that, when we first launched Avalanche subnets, which are now rebranded Avalanche L1s, they were all POA, meaning like it wasn't permissionless in terms of validation. If you acquired enough of the tokens to validate, you had to still be permissioned or whitelisted in terms of validation. It's funny, I have a question actually for you over at Arbitrum. I think you guys were the first L2 to have permissionless fraud proofs, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Technically, we had complete permissionless fraud proofs first. There was a push from OP where there were permissionless fraud proofs, but there was kind of a bottleneck at a multi-sig at one point. So it depends on your definition, and I think that we'll leave it at that.
Gotcha. Do you think outside of like argument's sake on crypto Twitter, like it's kind of funny, I feel like users just didn't care. Like we're all at the point where we're all arguing amongst ourselves, when in reality the people that we're trying to appeal to your point, just don't care about decentralization. Like decentralization only matters when it actually needs to be decentralized, whether it be for regulatory reasons or, I don't know, if there's a war in the world, you need decentralized consensus so a network doesn't go down, something like that. It's a little bit interesting because I don't know if you guys saw Base actually announced the app chains, I think it was like 2 days ago or yesterday even, and they're using AWS for data availability. And so it's a little bit sad that a centralized company running an L2 is now running on a centralized data availability layer. And so I don't think users actually care. And so it'll be interesting seeing like when decentralization actually matters again. I know, in the case of like North Korea, for instance, the Bybit hack, like decentralized bridges, they're probably being approached by three-letter US agencies like, hey, can you censor this transaction? And most of the time, they're not decentralized enough where they could actually censor the transaction because they're running like most of the nodes for consensus if they're a fully decentralized interoperability layer or something like that. And so even in that case, like they're still censoring transactions. I mean, they should be. Like North Korea shouldn't be allowed to just like fully wash or clean those funds. But I don't know. It's been interesting because I think the ethos, obviously, that we're all here for in the first place is decentralization. But we've gone so much in the opposite direction of decentralization in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I would say that my main slant is towards satisfying what these customers and users want, and then we have to build technology that doesn't compromise on these values that they have, cost, user experience, and that's going to take time, and it's also going to take a certain amount of scaling of different layers of the ecosystem to get there. But you can always, hopefully make more compelling products later to shift them onto decentralization, which is a better model than not getting the users or apps at all. So I think that I totally agree with your take. I think we just need to honestly lean in to the users, what the users are telling us, while also, remaining somewhat principled. There's always an opportunity to get them onto that new platform later, because they just want to build apps. Builders want to have their apps succeed. They want to have, millions of users. And sometimes to do that, they need to use these systems that, look like shortcuts in the short term.
But I would also say, we're talking about decentralization from a technological perspective, but decentralization is not only like a technological matter, it's also a cultural shift, and I think we haven't still achieved that. So it's also like the same, you can relate to the privacy, right? Like we do believe that people care about privacy, but in reality they don't. Like everyone accepts T's and C's, right? So doesn't read the messages, they're like, okay, accept, next.
Yeah, no, I think the message is very clear. Build the apps, go out there, worry about the decentralization later, and maybe let's talk about decentralization 2 years later on this panel.
But maybe quickly to add, I think actually enterprises do care, at least in my conversations, because they look at regulatory compliance, then it's definitely necessary. You cannot simply tell them, hey, we are running a database here, and that's how we are allowed to share the data with everyone and things like this. And also, like, you don't want to depend on a single entity to shut down your business and things like this. So, yeah.
No, I think that's all right as well. Institutions are definitely exploring more reliable solutions, and one of the aspects of reliability comes out of decentralization. But we'll know when we'll know. Now I'll come to the burning question. None of us, I haven't used that keyword yet, but I've heard a lot out there that they say ZK is the end game. ZK, that keyword. So I would like to know your take on it. Maybe one by one. Maybe you can start, Matt, this time. What is this thing about ZK? Is it the end game?
Yeah, I mean, regarding ZK technology, like ZK circuits more specifically, I've always believed like they're kind of the gold standard in terms of privacy, but in terms of actually helping scale blockchains via rollups, they've always been a little bit too costly in terms of compute. So I don't actually think it's the best case if you're using a rollup to scale blockchains. I think optimistic rollups, to be honest, have kind of won out longer term, at least long term if you say over a year and a half, which is like 5 years in our industry. But yeah, I think ZK is still the gold standard in terms of privacy, especially if you're trying to prove certain private information that might be stored off-chain and bring it onto blockchains and only allow like one-way informational flow, just in terms of like checks, meaning like in the US you have to be 21 years old to drink. I can just upload my identification, and via a ZK circuit it just says yes or no, and you know nothing else about my identity in terms of like me being over 21 years old or something like that.
Yeah, I fully agree. So with the next version of Polkadot Jam and so on, we specifically for the scaling part haven't integrated zero knowledge because we think it's too costly and so on, and you can create, as long as you can avoid it and integrate sharding solutions and so on, that are ultimately as secure as a CK-based solution, and you save all the computation costs. That makes a lot of sense, but obviously there are a ton of use cases for CK technology. Yeah.
Yeah, Nicky.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from my standpoint, it's like this. I mean, I guess you guys heard about Taiko, which is the multi-prover system, and essentially, like we're working with the likes of SP1, SGX, and Risk Zero, and we do believe that in the end of the day, ZK is the end game to a certain extent, but of course, it also depends again on the use case, right? I will not say like, it doesn't mean that everyone should go for it. Certain use cases might require different solutions. There are optimistic rollups, there are ZK rollups, there are Validiums, as I mentioned before, there are volitions. So it's up to your use case to decide which one fits you the best.
So a true believer. But Cooper, I think your take would be the most interesting one.
Yes, I felt that tension as we went down the line. I think, I'm going to say I think ZK is the end game. I think that, it's true that the optimistic model of doing things is always going to be cheaper because you're not computing everything. You only compute in the worst case scenario when you need to submit a proof. And that's just a certain security profile that some people will accept. And it makes sense in certain applications to have that low cost. I also see the value in everything being proven. But the issue with that is that proving times are quite long. And even when they get down, it's unlikely that you're going to be having proving times as fast as we have block speeds today. So there's always going to be some degree of trust that you have until that proof gets delivered and posted. But I do think that that's where other solutions come in to make a balance where we hopefully can bring all the finality times down on a lot of chains using ZK, Like it would be great if every rollup could have, you know, sub-hour finality, because the effect of a long challenge period is that funds basically have to get carried as like a carrying cost for any liquidity provider, a solver, a bridge. So when that goes down, everything trickles up and becomes a lot cheaper. And then on top of that, there's kind of the built-in, you know, interop benefits of being able to kind of use other proofs, you know, to kind of work with data or assets across different chains. But it will always be, I think, a kind of heterogeneous solution underneath where people are making different trade-offs just based on their security model and preferences.
Is Arbitrum doing any research in the ZK space right now?
Yeah, we have a really great research team. You know, we're the team that actually invented optimistic rollups, and so we're very on top of ZK solutions. I think it really just comes down to when do the customers ask for it, and you know, we have, you know, quite a deep bench of ZK researchers on the team.
That's great to hear. But is Avalanche going to be doing ZK ever, Matt?
So I don't know like what's public, but we actually acquired a team that does ZK for privacy. I think it was like 6 months ago. And they're building basically a privacy-based payment solution that then they can reuse that tech stack in our Avalanche L1 architecture for enterprises or institutional use cases. And so we are experimenting quite a bit in terms of ZK for privacy, but not actually for scaling.
And don't worry about the clock. You know, I know this discussion can go on and on and on for hours, and in fact, it might continue after this panel outside. But one last question to all of you. You know, people who are building projects, they're building DeFi, they're building gaming, they're building, you know, Tradify, they're building PayFi. Some of the enterprises are coming in, like, you know, some telecom company, energy gas companies and all. So what is this thing you want to tell them that you would be doing in 2025? And that makes sense to them to join Web3. I don't care which stack, any stack, but we want them on Web3. So what is your message to them so that, you know, they start seriously thinking about that Web3 is a playground they can actually come on and you know, build?
Yeah, I can kick off. I think that, you know, my message would be that the people that are playing with this technology, they're not doing it because they, you know, want to take part in a speculative ecosystem. They're doing it because this technology actually reduces costs and creates more efficiencies for them internally. And I think that that is kind of the validation we've been waiting for as an industry, to know that this technology will be adopted. And it's really just a matter of time, penetration, you know, the business conversations to proceed. But there's really real value here. And, you know, I think that if you're on the sidelines, it might be time to take a look.
Yeah, and just to add, I think something very important is also that this technology will really start to shine and outgrow once we have these network effects, like if different corporations are able to work together on chain that are currently don't trust each other necessarily, and then basically you are either a part of this and you grow with the network, or you aren't. So.
Yeah, I mean, it takes actually time for the innovation to get adopted, right? So like it doesn't happen in one day. So essentially it's important for people to come and explore, generally speaking, the technology, to try it out, for builders to build, and for us actually as an industry to educate people around us, like, and tell them about the benefits of it, right? So that's highly important, but also, like, as mentioned, had a bit of a discussion around decentralization. So also it's our job to teach them why decentralization is important, right? So, and for them to understand that they actually should go for censorship-resistant solutions.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I've come like full circle within this space where I think the way forward is like payments, remittances, efficiencies for settlement of like RWAs, tokenized assets, etc., which like everyone has talked about since 2017. But in the 2021 cycle, we kind of made our way elsewhere in terms of like Ponzi clicker games or PFP NFTs or kind of other use cases which might be fun in the short term, but not have any sort of longevity. And so I think we're gonna basically come full circle here in the next couple of years and see blockchains just being used for the use cases that they're designed for. And I mean, I think stable coins are still the #1 source of adoption within our industry.
Yeah, no, I think we have got many insights in several directions, but all pointing towards a better future in Web3. That's what I believe, and I think that's what we all believe. So thank you for coming here, joining us, and sharing these valuable insights. we can continue outside in case you have. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll host you again probably, and maybe hear about what is happening more and more next year.
Yeah, thank you so much, folks.